To walk with nature as a poet is the necessary condition of a perfect artist. Thomas Cole, artist, founder of the Hudson River School. This is The Artful Painter, art lessons for artists, collectors, and people who love art. I'm on a journey to learn how to paint, and I welcome you to join me on that journey. To that end, I invite other artists to share some of what they know with you, and together we can learn. Your art lesson today comes from artist Andrew Tischler. Andrew Tischler pursues artistic truth in his painting. Currently residing in New Zealand, Andrew was born in Texas. Later, his family immigrated to Australia when he was a young child. The son of a sculptor, Andrew loved to look at his father's art books. He became enthralled with American wildlife painter Carl Rungius. Moved by the paintings he saw, Andrew began painting at a young age and quickly progressed to become a professional full-time artist by the time he was 21 years of age. Early in his career, Andrew strove to create quality paintings. In order to do that, he felt the need to work out a methodology to produce consistent quality. He became obsessed with the process of painting. Andrew likens this obsession to that of surfers who go around the world searching to catch the perfect wave. He is addicted to the search, the chase of an idea for a painting, and of the feeling of making the best painting possible. Now, this episode clocks in at over 2 hours long, and Andrew does not hold back. He explains where his ideas for a painting comes from and how he develops the idea. He also shares 3 questions all artists should ask when developing an idea for a painting. He says these questions have transformed his career as an artist. Though Andrew achieved early financial success as a professional artist, like a lot of artists, he was affected by the global downturn in the economy. That downturn taught him the importance of diversifying his sources of income as an artist, and in this episode, he explains how he has accomplished that. My name is Carl Olson, and this is The Artful Painter. So Andrew, everybody has a caption, I think. I mean, I hate to pigeonhole people because we do change over time. But right now, where you are as an artist, what would be a 2 or 3 or 4 word phrase that would identify you or would be your caption?
Wow. That's, gee. It's interesting because you know what that reminds me of. I find that fascinating because it reminds me of I can't remember the name of the motivational speaker, but he encouraged people to write down what would be written on their tombstone, as to like how they would be remembered. And as an artist, I thought, well, that'd be very, very interesting. You get the kind of typical loving husband, whatever. But what would describe me as an artist? In 3 or 4 words, or what, almost like a code for myself, I think it would have to do with something like, authentically pursuing the truth.
Good.
I think that would have to be it, because what I'm trying to do as an artist is really get that thing that's in me out. And if I could add one little piece to that, it would probably be, pursuing the truth and sharing it with others, sharing the joy of painting with others. Not to get too Bob Ross about it, but it really is about that.
Yeah, that one's taken.
Yeah, I know, but I think it fits, man. I think it fits.
Yeah.
It really is a joy for me to do that, and I keep living my passion and speaking my truth artistically, and just trying to just dive into what that means and do the best I can to share it.
Beautiful. Andrew, I see you've gotten into podcasting too. That's pretty cool.
I'm one episode deep. I have about 10 or 12 recorded. I released the first one with Cesar Santos maybe about 3 weeks ago now. And so far, I mean, the views and the listens have been pretty fantastic. You know, we're getting some good numbers on it and people are responding to the conversation well. So I'm grateful for that. But I'm a big lover of podcasts myself. And, you know, I listen to podcasts all the time while I paint and audiobooks. And I thought, well, you know, there are some conversations that I really want to have with some people, and why don't I record those for other people's benefit? So, no, I'm just really super stoked that you asked me to come on your podcast. And yeah, hopefully I can deliver some quality.
I have no doubt of that, Andrew. It's amazing to me what we can do today. You know, I'm talking to you. You're located in New Zealand. Where in New Zealand do you live, approximately?
Yeah, so for those who aren't really familiar with New Zealand, I mean, it's a small 2 islands, or 3 islands if you include Stewart Island, in the southern hemisphere, just off the coast of Australia. And I'm in the South Island, right down the bottom of the South Island. Very cold down here in the winter, but we're just inland from a major town called Dunedin. And I live in a little town called Lawrence, which only has about 486 people in it. And,
wow.
You know, it's pretty rural. It's pretty country, but that's the way we kind of like it. And fortunately for us, we've just got this amazing landscape around. So it never takes very long for us to be, you know, I say us because my wife, frequently is with me on trips. Never takes very long for us to be just in amazing, beautiful scenery and plenty of subject matter to be painted.
That's I was just going to say that's a perfect scenario for a painter. That's incredible.
Absolutely.
Do you ever get jaded driving along and oh yeah, there's another mountain. Oh yeah, there's another. Does it ever wear off?
No, something happens with me. It's kind of the opposite. I feel like, you know, so excited and just blown away by really simple phenomenon, you know, the way the light shines on a rickety old gate or the side of a barn or maybe an old tree in the middle of a field. And yes, mountains, of course, of which there are plenty down here. But I have so many ideas and there's so much inspiration that my frustration comes from, you know, knowing that I will never be able to get to the bottom of that. I will never be able to explore every idea that I have because time is finite and I only have so much life to live. The older I get, the more painfully aware of that fact I am. And it's something that, so when I'm driving past, I hate missing things, but I'm like, you know, because I might be on the way somewhere. Like say, recently I was on the, you know, driving on the road. Some people may have seen my latest YouTube video. I was driving down the road on the way to meet my friend Freeman White and my other friend Samuel Earp, and we're going to go painting on plein air. And I just wanted to stop every little while, you know, and get out the camera. But if I had done that, it would have taken me a week to get there to take a 2-hour drive. So there's a lot here to be seen and a lot here to explore.
Yeah. I know I have to really balance it when I'm traveling with family, with my wife in particular. She's very patient, very supportive, but I'm still cognizant of, you know, she's not looking at the same things that I am. So I try to break it up in such a way that she's able to take it in. But hey, that's fantastic. And do you always have your kit with you or a sketchbook or something so that when you do catch something while you're driving or out hiking?
Frequently. Oh yeah, I mean, frequently it's you know, I'm always armed with a camera. You know, I'm one of those artists that does use some photographic reference, and we can get into that later in the conversation if you like. A lot of people find that kind of topic quite interesting and can be polarizing as well. But I always have a camera with me, and now more and more I'm taking that on plein air kit with me, which is a Pashad box. It screws into a camera tripod. I've got a beautiful little box that was made by this guy who's a master at making these things, Ben Haggett. He's got a company called Alla Prima Pashad, and he's, I'm not sponsoring or I just a fan of his product. And I bought this box maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, and I'm still using it. It's still like in amazing, immaculate condition today. It's been dropped, it's been thrown in the back of the truck and all sorts, but it's still great.
Well, if it looks clean and there's no paint on it, it hasn't been used, right? So it's good.
Oh, no. I mean for the structural technique.
Oh,
no,
got you. Okay.
My Pashad box looks like a Jackson Pollock painting. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. When I look at your work, I'm reminded of there's a certain epicness or a certain majesty to your landscape painting. It reminds me of when I walked into the United States Capitol many, many, many years ago and saw, this huge Thomas Moran painting, and that's I have that same sensation when I see your work. There's an epicness to the landscape painting, and you also do intimate portraits, still lifes. You're a very versatile painter. How do you characterize yourself when you talk about you as an artist to someone?
Wow. Well, firstly, thank you. It's a huge compliment that you would, say that my work somehow reminded you of Thomas Moran. I mean, that's awesome because he's a real hero of mine, along with Bierstadt and a lot of the other Hudson River School artists. But what might be interesting for your listeners, maybe, is to talk a little bit more about that background as how I came to try to approach landscape painting in that way. But before all of the still life and portrait stuff and a little bit of wildlife material now, I was solely focused on landscape painting. And, maybe some of your listeners might have trouble placing me as well in terms of my accent, but I was originally born in the United States. So I was born in Texas. My whole family came from Texas. I was very young, about 6 years old. We moved to New Zealand, and lived there for 4 years. And when I was 10 years old, we left and immigrated to Australia, where I would spend the next 20-something years, 22, 23 years. And it was looking at these books on the shelf that my father had kind of been collecting over the years. And my dad was an artist as well, but he was a sculptor. And so he was trying to train me up. And of course, when I was looking at these books, I was just completely floored by the works of the Hudson River School. And that was some of my father's favorite painters, especially Bierstadt. But there was another guy, very different, but an American classic, kind of painter, was Carl Rungius. So he's very big in the wildlife scene, of course. But
magnificent art,
Yeah, it's stunning, like the way he could use a brush and his color. And so my dad was trying to push me to kind of really look at and appreciate these works. Of course, I'd never seen an original of any of these painters, because here I am growing up in Australia and we don't have that. And also I was kind of, as I was developing as an artist, I wasn't going to be taking photographic reference or, finding maybe something online or in a magazine and paint places that I had not been to. So it was really important to me, even from a young age, and that this was encouraged, was, paint what you know and paint what you respond to, things that you're intimately familiar with. So here I was taking all of these philosophies that I was trying to gather from these tiny little reproductions in books and apply it to the Australian landscape, which is a very different beast. I mean, if people haven't been to Australia, I mean, one of the first things that you notice when you get off the plane is just how different the landscape is. The geology and the flora is just incredibly unique. I mean, the place is so old that even the hills and the mountains have got a very different kind of aspect to them, a very different shape. And the colors in those rocks, I mean, some of them you can have these brilliant scarlets and crimson colors coming out of the earth. So here I was tackling this really unique, really interesting subject, but trying to do it in a Hudson River way. And so I was really, just really inspired by them. But then, the original paintings that that I did have access to were the Australian painters. And there was a fantastic group of painters in Australia called the Heidelberg School. Artists like Tom Roberts, Frederick McCubbin, Arthur Streeton, and then later Hans Huyssen. And Hans Huyssen to this day is one of my favorite painters of all time. And I'd really encourage anybody who loves their painting and loves landscape to check out his work, because I believe it's some of the best impressionistic landscapes that have ever been painted.
I'm going to have to check that out. Yeah.
Yeah, especially this one painting called Droving into the Light. And I have probably spent days, if I add up all the time, standing in front of that painting. The original hangs in the Art Gallery of Western Australia, and it is an absolute masterpiece. You feel the heat, and you feel the tormented landscape. I mean, the Australian landscape is a really harsh kind of country, but he's able to get this truth in there, and at the same time this beauty. So it's a beautiful painting. You can find it all online, of course, but if you have the chance to ever see that original painting, it is truly breathtaking. So those were my influences early on, and I really became aware. Fortunately, early on in my career, I mean, I started full-time painting when I was 21.
Wow.
And I became really hyper aware that if I was going to make it as an artist, that the thing that I really needed was some sort of consistency and consistent quality. And so what became critical for me was working out what is my methodology. And that methodology came from, looking at all of these hero artists of mine, whether it was in a book or a reproduction, or whether I had the opportunity to see the original. And so that really helped me form my voice.
Well, you mentioned Carl Rungius. He said that go paint 2,000 paintings and then you can begin. So it sounds like you did that homework. You got started early, and you were really putting in the mileage on developing your technique.
I really relate to that. Paint your 2,000 paintings, then you can begin. As a kid, I had a martial arts background as well, so I was never really a sporty kid. I got picked on a lot, so hence the martial arts. But I knew that to get good at anything, it took repetition, and it took this kind of diligent practice, showing up and just doing it. And then, that means you're doing it every day. It's weird. I get just a little bit of a tangent here, but I get messages and emails constantly from people, from all over the world. Instagram's a big one, where people hit me up through the messaging app on Instagram, going, how do I improve my art? How do I get to the next level? And I think a lot of people out there are looking for this quick fix solution. They're looking for something that, maybe I'd be able to tell them some little trick, some secret formula that I'm going to give them, and it's suddenly going to all make sense, and they're going to be able to do it in 10 minutes. I kind of get that impression. I know some people aren't quite there, but there are some people that really do want it now. And that practice, I mean, nothing can replace the years. Yes, you're going to be able to learn some strategies and some techniques that will get you there faster and maybe help unlock some understandings for you. But, the main thing is you showing up and diligently practicing this, with the right tools.
Right. That's something I can identify with, and I'm going through. I'm getting started very late in life. I'm much older, and there's no shortcuts. Even though life is limited, there's no shortcuts to it. But I do find that it's important for me to try to go to people who have put in the mileage, so that I don't repeat the mistakes, or at least I have a good foundation to get started. So that's where I come from with all of this. But you're right. There's no substitute. You can read many books, watch many YouTube videos, until you pick up the brush, put the paint on the palette, and start moving that paint around and putting it on the canvas or whatever surface. You just, it's not going to happen. You're not going to develop the skill until you do it.
That's right. Yeah, 100%. 100%. I mean, it takes you showing up in a real deliberate way constantly. And it's this consistency that I think is missing from a lot of people's practice. The other thing about us creatives, I mean, it's difficult. I mean, painting is a difficult thing. It's an emotional thing. And a lot of us have our hearts on our sleeves, and we take it personally, our failures and our triumphs. And I feel that has an enormous impact on our productivity. If you have a bad day painting, the chances that you're not going to pick up the brush again for another week are much greater than if you had a good day. So that's something else. You've got to battle through that consistency and just realize that this is just another rung on the ladder. Each painting is a stepping stone to in a long progression on this journey. God, how many cliches can I throw out in one sentence? Yeah. But it's true. I really believe it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, one of the things I appreciate you, Andrew, is, here's how I found you. I always think about, okay, how did I first come in contact with someone? I did a search. I wanted to learn how to paint a seascape. Wow, it sounds as cliche as it can be, but hey, that's what I wanted to do. And who showed up?
All right, man.
Red, there you are. But see, that started curiosity. It said, "Oh my, look at this!" Look at that. Yeah. So you're very generous in your teaching. And I've noticed that with a number of artists, there many do want to share. What motivates you to teach?
Well, yeah, good question. I'm still unpacking that for myself. I'm 35 years old now, and I'm still learning who I am and what my drivers are and my motivations are. But what inspires me to teach? I mean, I love people, and I love painting, and it just seems like this perfect marriage of those two loves. I also feel absolutely, totally grateful and humbled by artists that have come before me, and this body of knowledge that together collectively artists have accumulated. So whatever I've been able to gather from that body of knowledge, I feel like I have very little ownership of. There's nothing that I have that I feel is totally unique. So that kind of builds into this kind of need to share whatever I've gathered. And I'll let people know frequently, in my YouTube videos, who's inspired me, who my heroes are, where I got a particular technique, where this idea came from. And frequently, unless I'm giving a shout out to a living artist, frequently they're heroes from the past, but there's so many amazing painters out there. And so I love that. I started, it's interesting. I came into teaching totally by accident.
How so?
YouTube was very much secondary for me, and I could explain my journey of how I ended up on YouTube. But now that I'm there, I've really caught the bug. But I was, doing the typical artist thing. And Perth in Western Australia is really where I got my start. But I was painting, and it was hard, and life sucked for a period of time. As a lot of artists can attest to. But life is difficult, and there is the nature of the reality in which we live, which I don't agree with, but you just have to lump it, is you have to make money to live, because there are these pesky things called bills, and you got to eat your food. And so if you want to put gas in your car, gas in your car and food on the table, you're going to have to make ends meet. And sometimes the romantic idea of living life as an artist, and this kind of glamorous lifestyle, I'm going to drink coffee and paint all day. Sometimes it doesn't quite work out like that, because, oh, look, the rent's late, and no, I can't go out tonight because I can't get there because I don't have any gas. So, the reality set in for me, and I thought, okay, well, my paintings at that time there was a dip in the market, and one of the things that might be interesting to talk about as well later on, if we just flag this idea, is how to overcome and withstand volatility in the marketplace. Because if people are wanting to be professional artists, you better have a way to withstand that volatility.
I agree.
It's quite an interesting topic as well, and things that people aren't quite so much aware of nowadays, and they need to be more hyper aware nowadays. But the bottom fell out of the marketplace, and I suddenly found myself in a situation where I couldn't sell paintings to make a living, and I thought, okay, well, here I'm going to go into teaching, and I hated that idea because I was still a firm believer that those who can't teach somehow in a backwards way. I thought. Okay, well, if I go, and I was carrying really bad ideas that I picked up from friends, family here and there, and you pick up things like a sponge, and then you find yourself repeating crap that's just not true.
Yeah, well, I would have never dreamed this, because there's an exuberance to your teaching. I would have never thought that. Yeah.
No, I went full circle. I mean, look, if you could have been there in the room, and there are only 10 people that can say this, but for my very first workshop, it was an absolute cringe fest. Like I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea how to speak to a crowd. I had no idea how to, deliver a message. And that's where my growth really began. Because after that, what happened is it sucked so bad that bothered me. And now suddenly I had a challenge. It wasn't a positive experience. I mean, it was a growing experience, so I guess it was positive in that respect, but it wasn't a happy experience for me, the first workshop. And so my first workshop was a 4-week course where people would come in on every Saturday over this 4-week period. And suddenly, because people were aware of my work, I had a full class. And so now suddenly I had a paycheck. And so that was good. But I needed the next bit to come in there. So by the second and third and fourth week, I'd well and truly kind of gotten comfortable with the idea of speaking to a group of people. Even at this point, it was only 10 people, but I became comfortable enough that I was like, okay, I can give this another shot. And then I worked out, the math. If I could do, 5 or 6 of these workshops, maybe every 6 months, I might be okay.
Can I ask you a question about that? Sure. So you became comfortable from the experience. Did you take any workshops from anyone else, or get coaching on speaking or presenting or anything like that, or was it was the experience?
Yeah, not necessarily coaching on speaking directly, but at the time I was actually a really big personal development junkie, and I was attending a few seminars and this was just basically on life personal development. A big favorite of mine was Dr. John Demartini. I had his books, I'd read his books, and then I years later went to an event where he was there, and that's a really interesting story, which we might get into if you like, but because John Demartini helped me with my career in ways that I couldn't have comprehended at the time. He was one of the authors from The Secret, if people remember that old chestnut from back in the early 2000s. It was all about positive thinking, but the interesting thing about Demartini is he's not a positive thinking guy. He's one of these subscribers to the idea that the universe is dualistic. To everything that goes on in life, there is both a positive and a negative, and human beings with their emotional state are bipolar by nature. So we either look at things as a positive or a negative. We can't see both sides at the same time. And his work's really fascinating because it allows you to see both sides of any given situation. And it can be very confronting and very challenging, especially when he gets into some really heavy topics. But look, I was listening to these people, and I was actually seeing people up on stage. And rather than getting help and development in how to speak, I was just remember watching them going, how do they do that? How do they get up on stage and explain something without notes, without a set list, these complicated topics and concepts, and not get nervous and not shake and deliver their message, just perfectly.
As far as you could see.
As far as I could see, yeah. Of course, there's mountains of preparation that go into it, and I know that now.
Yeah.
But what I was seeing was just this dance, this graceful, act going on, and I thought, well, I'd love to be able to do that with painting. And then about a year in, I started to get into my stride. And so what I had done, shortly after my first workshop, I decided that what I'd do was book a public speaking gig. And I called up the local art society. And I said, I'd like to come and give a presentation. And they frequently had artists come and give presentations at this art society. And so people found out that I was coming. And, it's funny. The president of the society said, "Oh, Andrew, we've not really had this many people here in recent months." I'm like, "How many people showed up?" And she's like, "Oh, about 120. I'm like,
wow.
What? So in like one room at a time. And I shook my way through that. I was shaking like a leaf through that whole presentation. But after that, it was kind of exhilarating, and people seemed to really enjoy it. And I was just talking about painting and my methodology and, my philosophy when it comes to art, and, a little bit about my story of how I got started. But people really enjoyed it. And they said, "Oh, can you come again? Can you come back again and talk to us again sometime?" And from there, I started doing, more regular art society presentations, and then, more and more workshops. But, the thing, I could not have been prepared for what YouTube would offer. This is not from a monetary point of view at all. I mean, I don't really make a lot of money off my channel, not by any means. But what it gives me is this sense of purpose and connection that I don't think money can buy. I mean, as a result of putting the YouTube video out there, I mean, here you're talking to me from the other side of the planet because you watched a seascape video.
That's
on
how
YouTube.
I found you. Exactly.
And that, to me, that is insanely cool. That I've had the opportunity to connect with and reach people now on a global scale. And I've said this to people, my students and my subscribers and followers, that there has never been a better time to be an artist. My particular mode is, I love teaching now, and that's now one of my main focuses is teaching. I still sell my work, and I still work with clients and from a waiting list and that sort of thing. So it is difficult juggling both, but teaching, I'd have to say, is right up there, like equal with, painting privately by commission. Like I love it now, just because that we have access. And I don't think anybody could have anticipated this. Somebody that I really like, Jordan Peterson, put it in a really fantastic way. He said, "This is our second printing press. YouTube is our second printing press, because now our access to knowledge and information is so great that I think we're going to see the acceleration in artistic development, happening again. I see it already happening. I think there are some painters that are alive today that are just amazing. I think painting and representational realist painting, I mean, that's what I consider painting, not, the contemporary stuff. I'm not a fan of contemporary art, sorry.
So you weren't the high bidder on the Banksy that shredded then?
No, but mind you, look, okay, I should say some contemporary art I do really appreciate. Like, I am a big fan of Banksy. I think the guy's really clever. But
he was, yes.
I'm talking you're more, more run-of-the-mill pile of garbage in the corner of a gallery where people have to read an essay to understand what the artist was feeling that afternoon. They put it together.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm not a fan of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I'm
sorry. I feel like I went on a massive rambling tangent. Did I even answer your question?
I don't even remember the question, Andrew. It was about you getting involved in YouTube. I will mention this. I just let listeners know. I'm going to provide a link to your channel. Not that it's hard to find, but I am going to provide a link to it. But you're up to 112,000 subscribers. So that's a massive audience to be sharing with. And all this information is free. Now, you do offer courses that can be bought at a very reasonable. I was just looking at them a few minutes ago before you called. And they're very affordable. I couldn't believe how affordable these courses are. So that's another fantastic resource.
Well, thank you for saying so. I mean, I was approached right before we released our first portrait DVD. And if people do jump online and they have a look, I at the moment I have only 2 DVDs, but there are more coming. I've got a portraits coming out and a landscape, a couple of landscapes coming out.
You also have the digital download available.
Downloads, downloads and DVDs available. Of those tutorials. But early on when I had a portrait tutorial that was available, no longer available because I did decide to pull it off the market to make way for the new product. And it was a little bit of a risky move there, but I did decide to take that off. Not that anything was wrong with it. I got a lot of hate as a result of why is that no longer available? But
what's a good problem to have then?
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of building pressure, and I find pressure enormously motivating. And that's something, like having a deadline or having some sort of gap. Nature always likes to fill gaps. So if there's an empty space there, I just thought that put so much more pressure on me to get the new one out. So I pulled that. But when I first brought out that video, it was interesting because I was just about to bring out the DVD of that, shortly after the release of the YouTube video. And I was approached, and I won't mention names, but I was approached by a major, publisher of, art material. And they wanted to offer this for around $200 US. And we couldn't reach an agreement because I refused to charge that much. Because I've got people in Indonesia, in Africa, across, Eastern Asia, people, let's say, I don't want to ruffle any feathers or insult anybody, but places where there is lower incomes when compared to the United States or the West or, the UK. So I felt that what I needed to do is just charge a fair price across the board of something that was affordable and put as much out. Yeah, put as much out for free as possible. I just couldn't see it. I couldn't see charging that much. So, and it's not to grab on anybody that wants to charge a lot. I mean, listen, there's some people out there that feel they're worth that, and more power to them. But personally, I just found that if I kept the price really low, it would just give more people access. And there's more on the way. One of the things that I'm looking forward to in 2019 are actual courses, where there will be multiple weeks where somebody could enroll in that course and be able to download, a massive amount of content, or have the DVD set of content, and we would dissect in detail a particular subject. If it's landscape, we'd break down the individual elements of painting that landscape, from trees to rocks to clouds to atmospheric perspective to linear perspective to color mixing, materials, the whole spectrum would be there in this course. So that's taken a lot of time to develop that, but we anticipate that that's going to be out sometime in 2019.
Beautiful. I think it's great that you have multiple ways to bring in income to support yourself as a professional artist. As I really think the whole notion of being a professional artist has really evolved. And you mentioned this earlier. I think it's a great topic to explore. Having multiple avenues of income coming in to support yourself as a professional artist.
Yeah, It is so important to me now, and I came up in the Western Australian scene when the going was really good, and we were in an economic bubble that was just such a high for everybody that people thought that it was never going to end. And so this was around the time of, early 2000s, then around 2008, 2009, as people will remember, the financial crash happened with the American housing bubble that just had this kind of impact that was felt worldwide. So in Western Australia, though, we had some insulation from that initially. And so I'll explain how I came to be, diversified. But I think that this is important, and hopefully your listeners will relate to this. So I will get there.
Carl. No problem. But, we love a good story.
But what had happened? I mean, early in the. Well, let me back up as well. Because at this stage, I was obsessed with my father's work and was really following his example in terms of his ethic and how he approached. I mean, he's a very hardworking man, still sculpts to this day. But I was watching him and kind of realized, earlier on in my teenage years that, hey, you're not doing any art. You're actually working a job, and he was working initially for a museum in New Zealand before we moved to Australia called Te Papa. And then he was working at the Perth Zoo as an exhibits designer. And then he became the director's right-hand man for a period of years. And he was using his creative thinking and his artistic, ability to apply to that job. And he was a really, valuable, part of the zoo, and put the Perth Zoo back on the map with some really fantastic exhibits. But I was watching that going, you're not producing your art. And there were a few things that happened for my dad to kind of come out of his art career. And there was, the crash of the late 80s. And, there were some other economic troubles and also the pressure of having a family. And so there are things that life is going to throw you. And I was starting to learn that from an early age, that life is going to throw you a curveball and you never know where that's going to come from. And it's going to hit you upside the head. And unless you have some way or some method to kind of catch you when you fall, then, it's going to be a very painful fall. So I had found myself in that same trap, and where my father had lost his business in the 80s, he built it back up again, fortunately. But here I was in the early 2000s, and we had this amazing economic boom. And it was the right place. It was at the right place at the right time, and it was in business with the right people. I had the right agent, representing me, and the prices just started doubling and doubling and doubling, like year on year. And I saw my prices go from a couple of $1,000s a piece, and to a couple of years later to 15,000. A couple of years after that, upwards around the $25,000 mark. And I wasn't really prepared for that. And so when the crash finally caught up to us in Western Australia, I found myself in a position going, oh, what do I do now? Because now I had built myself this really beautiful trap of having these really nice, big, expensive paintings and nobody around to buy them. And that was a very interesting situation for me. And I always liken that to a table. If you can imagine your business is the tabletop, and you're an artist, so you've got painting or sculpture or whatever you create as that leg that's holding up that table. Well, somebody comes along and kicks out that table leg, you've got nothing else holding that up. But if you have two legs under that table and somebody kicks one out, well, you're doing a little bit better, but it's still a pretty unstable table. You got three legs. Okay, you're doing better still. If you got four, well, now you got a tripod. Now you're much more stable if somebody comes along and kicks the fourth leg out. And now what I'm really interested in is having so many legs under that table, not to diffuse my attention away from what my core pursuit is, which is painting, but have enough legs under that table that if somebody kicks something out, then so what? I've been really fortunate in my career. In recent years, I've been around a lot of millionaires and billionaires with some of the artist residencies that I do. And one of them is aboard this, exclusive ship, of which I've been on board, several times. But this is something that I learned from them, just talking to them, because, you'll be sitting there having a glass of wine and you need to know them a little bit better. And I would always ask them, so how do you do what you do? And the answer that I get from a lot of these people that are vastly fortunate and fantastically, successful, like you can't even imagine. the wealth, a lot of what my favorite people that I've met, they started with very little to almost nothing and built themselves up to this, empire, status. They talk about a lot of things working for them in conjunction simultaneously. And they also talk about things working for them passively. I believe that work in a job where you trade your time for money is a trap. And it's probably the biggest trap humankind has built for itself. I couldn't think of another way to destroy somebody's life than have them trade their time for money. And unfortunately, this is where most of us find ourselves. And it's not that there's any shame in that. But I mean, the truth is that and I just know this from the sheer volume of people that email me, they're working a job and they don't want to do it because it's not aligned with their vision and their passion. And this is something that I find it's very painful for me. It hurts me. And it just makes me want to just work even harder at what I do because I got out, fortunately, and I still work very, very hard, and I still, believe in delivering as much as I can. But I see so many people in that situation, and I remember what it was like to make coffees and pull beers, as they say in Australia, working behind the bar, waiting tables, doing all that sort of thing. It's hard work, man. And a lot of my workshops that I taught when I was still doing live workshops in front of people, most of the people that were in attendance were retirees. So they had worked their full life and now they had a bit of time on their hands to be able to direct it towards something that they really enjoyed. And I was always the youngest person in the class and I was the one teaching it. I found that very strange. And I thought, well, where's all the young people?
Well, that's still the problem, though. See, the last few workshops I've been to, their hair is the same color as my hair, and that's that's gray, So I did have one class. There was a young girl in there. She was probably in her mid-20s. She was the youngest person. Everybody else had to be in their 50s or older.
Yeah, I think it's just the nature of our reality. But I mean, we can unpack that a little bit. Maybe it might be a little bit controversial. I hope I don't upset anybody out there. I'm just simply trying to state, that is just the nature of how it works, man. We've got to live, and until such a time as living is free, and that's a whole different tin of worms there. But I think that it's going to be like this until you can find a way and find some strategies from some people that do know how the system is rigged and how to get around it. Those strategies have been really helpful for me, and maybe that might be an interesting place to go. If you don't mind, I will just mention that, there are resources out there by people who are, fantastic within, the fields of say business development. I mean, even being a professional artist, I'm trying to do my bit, but I'm probably small fry in this game at this stage, but I can see that there's so many people out there with amazing strategies that if we could just apply these in a diligent way and more often, that we could get further ahead and just incrementally just put one foot in front of the other and just carry on that path. And we can see those improvements. And then eventually you might find yourself in a situation where, hey, you're a full-time artist. For me, that was always the goal, is just to paint full-time.
Well, I know a guy that's in your part of the world. He's actually in Australia. His name is James Schramko, and that guy is one of the best that I've ever listened to and talked with and benefited from when it came to business development. A lot of the things you hear is it's real hypey. They're selling the dream, but he's selling the engine that makes it work. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And a lot of the people that I respond to are engine makers. I love that analogy. I'm allergic to hype almost. I realize though that with this clickbait society that we live in now and social media, that people have to use that hype to get people's attention. It's sad, but it's true. And then hopefully those people that are perpetuating, the hype are able to deliver with some quality. But the speakers that I really enjoy, John DeMartini, who I've already mentioned, I think is fantastic. He dispelled the myth that money was bad and that somehow I was selling myself short as an artist and selling my principles and values out in order to derive an income from my work. That was a huge paradigm shift for me. Another speaker that I really like is Tony Robbins, of course, and most people know about Tony Robbins, but if ever I'm feeling flat or in a lull or just in a dull mood, I'll put some Tony Robbins on. I'll find some of my favorite YouTube clips, or I've got several CD sets that I'll just start listening. And I've listened to him several times. But Tony Robbins is one of these masters of creating your state of mind, which has so much to do with how not just how we approach our art, but how we approach lives and our life in general. Grant Cardone is a recent one that I've found really funny, and yes, very hypey, but he's very, when you get right down to it, and I've listened to all of his books that were available on Audible. When you get right down to it, he really is a down-to-earth guy. I mean, he's a brawler from back in the day, but he has brought that sensibility to his business, and it's really enjoyable listening to his books. Most of them are read by him. And another person that I'm really enjoying is Gary Vaynerchuk as well. And that's helped me immensely just when it comes to, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and the whole social media game, which I must admit I still struggle with. But Gary Vaynerchuk has really helped me with that. Because when it comes down to it, I'm a really old school guy myself. All of this internet stuff is really new to me. Despite the fact I was growing up in the era where the internet was just coming in. I just never had that ability because I just never paid attention to it. It wasn't until later that I was like, oh, I've got to understand this thing. And I'm gradually, I'm getting there.
Well, we got to get back to the art then.
We got to get back to the art. Yeah.
So you do. No, all of that is important. I think that's a very important part of our life lessons as artists. And I've experienced this with the filmmaking and photography side in my other podcast, The Artful Camera. We've talked about this topic many times, and it's hard to wrap your mind around it, because what we want to do is that one thing that we like the most, right? Whether that's operating a camera, handling a brush, or sculpting. That is really what we're wanting to do. But all these other things are what facilitate us doing it without the 9 to 5, because the 9 to 5 will suck the art out of your life.
Oh, absolutely.
Fast,
absolutely. Look, when it comes to, I'm glad you brought that up actually, because it kind of reminds me of the point that I should have made when I was talking about that. But when you're doing this full time, let's say you've just got out of the 9 to 5 trap and you're working as an artist, that diversification, along with that, my other favorite word is synergy. You've got to build some sort of aspect of synergy. So yes, you're going to have a passion. I mean, for me, it's painting. I love painting. I love all kinds of paintings. So for me, synergy is going to be, look, I'm going to paint this painting, and then I might have a print available of that painting eventually, be doing some more limited edition prints. And then I'm going to have a tutorial on how I painted that painting. Maybe there will be a little bit of merchandise off the back of that. But then off of the free content that was also generated from that, I've also got my YouTube channel where there's a little bit of ad revenue coming through. And then I painted it with some products that I, really believe in and I am behind 100%. I won't promote anything I don't personally use or believe in. And then there might be some sort of deal there where I get supported for my efforts through that mechanism as well.
I just think that's smart.
Yeah, and so yeah, I mean, you do have to be a little bit smart about it, but once you start to build this up as an engine or as a machine, it can start to work for you in the background, and then can free you up. It takes an inordinate amount of time and effort to build that, but once it's been built and once you've developed it, it can start working for you. Now, like maybe teaching's not your thing, and maybe the free content is not your thing as an artist. But there are other ways of doing that and making that work. There's got to be hundreds of ways out there. It's just a question of finding the format that works for you. But something that will really get people's brains going, I know, is this book called The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And to me, that was so important in learning how to escape that 9-to-5 trap, and trading your time for money, and being able to go, into your creative pursuit fully by just improving the efficiency of what you're doing and doing things the right way, building that machine, have it work for you in the background, is really quite important.
Well, is the biggest charge still, though, the sell of a painting when you have a painting that you've worked hard on and it sells? Is that where the joy is?
No, not at all. In fact, the joy of selling, I had to nip that in the bud as quickly as I could, because that is something that I think is the kiss of death for many artists. Mm-hmm. Now, there maybe this might come across as a little bit of a contradiction. We have to sell paintings in order to make a living. If you want to be a full-time artist or sell your sculptures or whatever you're producing, you're a photographer, you're selling your photography.
Oh, we're complicated.
Yeah, we're complicated. So you've got to be able to sell that. The trick is divorcing yourself from that financial transaction, and not taking those highs personally, but removing the emotion from the finances and just staying on point and staying on track. For me, the high is making the painting, not selling the painting.
Beautiful, yeah.
Because I feel it's almost like, I hear surfers talk about this, or, catching that perfect wave, and they'll, Rip Curl, branded that whole saying, the search. They're searching. They're going around the world to jump on a wave and surf these waves, and surfers will talk about these things in very unique ways, and they'll get very passionate about that. I feel the same way about painting and going out to see landscapes and being immersed in nature and my subject, or coming face to face with somebody that I find really inspiring that I just have to paint. That high for me, and then creating the work and being proud of what I've created, which is another story, but trying to chase that feeling is, this time I'm going to make a perfect painting as best as I can make it. Yeah. That is the high for me, and that is the goal. It's the search. It's the process, and I'm involved in that process. I don't always get there. That's the interesting thing. Is it what tends to happen as you've been doing this for a period of years, is that you get addicted to that process. You get addicted to the act of chasing that idea. So that's the bit where I'm in now. So now, if I sell a painting, don't get me wrong, I'm enormously grateful. Like I get very grateful to the point where, sometimes I well up, because I just, when I come face to face with a collector, and this is why I don't work with galleries anymore, is because I want to be face to face with collectors. When I'm shaking their hand and they've just bought a painting, it's like, thank you for allowing me to continue my search. Thank you for allowing me to continue to do what I do. But it's not like, hey, I got some money, what can I go buy now? Not at all. Because look, in my early 20s, I would walk away from an exhibition that had sold out with, tens of thousands of dollars in my pocket, and not have a single idea about what to do with that money. And then months later to a year later, have nothing to show for it. And then just go, where did it all go?
Well, I got to tell you a story. I'll probably cut this out of the podcast, but a friend of mine was a bass player for Frank Zappa.
Wow.
Yeah. So he told me, he says, when he got the gig with Frank Zappa, Zappa took him aside and he says, now, son, you see all these guys over here? They've all blown their money. And he says, this gig's not going to last forever. He says, you take your money, go buy your beat up car and put the rest of it in the bank. And he said, that's exactly what he did. He said, no one else did it though. And he said, those guys are hurting today because they didn't save their money. And he was right. That gig didn't last.
Yeah. So. You got to keep that in, because I mean, I think that's so important. The gig doesn't last, and that was something that I learned you're talking to a guy who actually lost it all. Not many people know that. I mean, from the outside looking in, I think a lot of people would have made the assumption it's like, especially the people that knew me in Perth. Like, I'm not well known or famous, by international standards at all, but within a small circle, I got well known for what I was doing, and so people would. If they ever found out how deep that struggle was and that rut that I was in, they would have been like, really? How? And it was just through me being an idiot. And I wasn't into drugs or alcohol or partying or gambling or anything, far from it. I wish I knew where the money had went. Like if I did have, I joke about this, it's morbid, but if I had a drug problem, at least I would know where it went, but I have no idea. I have no idea. I have nothing to show for it. And that was just me being young and foolish. But the goal was, early on, before I found myself in that situation, the goal was early on to just keep painting and to keep the gig going, to keep, and that the trick is knowing what the gig is. And for me, it doesn't matter. The size of your studio doesn't matter. The what you drive does not matter. Where you live, doesn't matter unless you're in a dangerous situation, of course. But what the main thing that matters is that space between you and the canvas, which is about 2 feet. Yeah. It doesn't matter how big your studio is. All that matters is that 2 feet right there where you're working away at your craft. And, the reality of that is something that is really important to keep in mind, because nothing will change that. The minute I start to think, I can do this, that, or the other, and get a little bit too big for my boots, then that's the minute things start to fall apart again. But just staying low, staying humble, and keeping it real, so to speak, is really important.
Very nice. Now, I've got to ask you, you mentioned earlier that you don't work with galleries anymore. So how do people find your work so that they get you to do a commission piece?
Yeah, very good. So it's really interesting. One of the biggest clients that I've ever had found me recently through a Google search. He was searching a particular type of landscape that was pretty unique, and I specialized in these landscapes. And he just said, "I like the way you do it." And he got in touch, and now I'm dealing with this guy who, he's a fabulously wealthy guy. But he just found me through a Google search. I realized though that I needed to have some sort of level of, self-reliance, and I'm very self-driven, self-motivating as well. And I wanted to be face-to-face with galleries, with clients. And so I dealt with galleries early on in my career, and they certainly did help me build up to a point. And I should mention, I was in a very unique situation with one gallery in particular. Two beautiful people that I love dearly. Shout out to Colin and Gay. They had this gallery in Western Australia in Perth, and this is where I got my start. And we not only struck up a business relationship, but a very deep friendship that still lasts today. And they really took care of me. And what we had in that relationship was trust. And this is not the thing that I could develop with any other gallery. I tried, not that I wanted to be buddy with them, but this kind of trust aspect, because artists, we're notoriously flaky, and we try to do a deal on the side, and we try to, cut out the middleman because we don't want to pay our 40 or 50% or whatever it happens to be. I was able with this, and I was able to negotiate with this, these wonderful people. a very reasonable commission rate. And I also said to them, I want to know the names and I want to meet face to face the people that are buying my paintings. And they said, done. Absolutely. And I stayed with them for 12 years. And right from the very beginning to when they finally closed their doors and they sold their gallery, because they were at the stage in life where they wanted to slow down and retire and, focus on them a little bit more. And that was great because it was a good time for me too, because I was just moving internationally and just branching out myself. So, that helped me develop a particular client list, which I still work through today. And these people are still finding me and still buying paintings today. And then I had a couple of other galleries in the Margaret River region that represented me for a time. And then there was some publicity associated with that. So now, the who's who in Western Australia and a lot of people with a lot of money, there was a period of time in Perth where there were more millionaires and billionaires per capita than any other city on the planet. That was a really interesting statistic about, Western Australia. And I think that had something to do with the mining and the resources that, were so rich in that state in Western Australia. So a lot of these people had my work. And so what would end up happening is that they would start finding me through a Google search, or they would go to their friend's house and go, oh, you've got a nice painting there. And they're like, yeah, this kid, Andrew Tischler, does them. Why don't you get in touch? I got his number in my cell phone here. And then I'd get called, and then I found myself, working with people on a one-on-one basis. And I really enjoyed that. And I still enjoy that today. But look, this is the first place that I'm going to announce this, Carl. So very
nice. Okay.
Very special. In 2019, people for the very first time are going to be able to come to the Tischler & Co. Studio Gallery in Lawrence in New Zealand. And this is the first time I've ever actually opened my own gallery, but now I've actually got my own space. And we live on a major state highway. When I say major state highway, people will laugh by American standards. It's still a 2-lane, one lane.
So it's not 8 lanes with an HOV.
No, far from it. You have to slow down to, I don't know what it is in miles per hour, but 50 kilometers per hour.
Okay.
As you crawl along through the town, and then you carry on to your next destination. But we live on a main highway between Dunedin and Queenstown, and we get a lot of tourist traffic on the road every year. We get about anywhere between 1.5 to 3 million cars on that road every year. And so I thought, as soon as we moved here, and we ended up here quite by accident, we just loved how beautiful it was. But people will be able to come and they'll be able to see this gallery now, and it's something I'm super excited about. We found an old building, which is an old drapery building from the late 1800s, and it's just a massive empty space. It's got some history. It's got some real character to it. My wife and I just love it. And so we've divided it in two. And so the front half is a gallery and the back half is the biggest studio that I've ever not only, worked in, ever seen. I always wanted to have a studio the size of Nikolai Fechin's.
Yeah,
I saw that in town. And I was looking at that going, man, if only I could have, the Northern Light down here at Southern Light, because we're in the Southern Hemisphere. But if only I could have that light and be able to paint in such a big vacuous space, what the work I could do down here. And now my studio is bigger. So it's cool.
It doesn't matter to have a big studio, but it sure is nice to have it.
The funny thing is it does. Yeah, it is nice to have it. But the funny thing is that the only thing that matters, the only space that matters, is that 2 feet away from the paint. Yeah. That's all that matters. But now at least I'm going to be able to walk back and see if my paintings are working or not. But
that's now, beautiful. I like that. But what made you decide to do that? I mean, that's a big investment to rebuild, build out this building, to put your art on display. Now you're going to have to, it's going to take time to sell and to market or to receive guests as they come in.
Sure. Look, no doubt. It's going to take a lot of time.
That's just, I'm just wondering how this works.
No. You're absolutely right. I mean, it takes time and it takes money. And, whilst we don't have, we're not able to do it all right now. We're just it's this project that we're slowly chipping away at. And, The time and developing that relationship with the town that I live in, that's something else that I'm really enjoying, and that this is a relationship that is going to take a lot of time to build. It's a very conservative town here. Beautiful people, New Zealanders. And if anybody's traveled to New Zealand, they'll know that they're the friendliest bunch on the planet, I think. But down here, it's been a sleepy little place for a lot of years, and this is a brand new thing to happen on their doorstep. So a lot of people so far, I mean, they've been incredibly supportive and encouraging. But look, I mean, time and money, and I think I've only been able to do that by putting in place some of the principles that we've spoken about earlier, through the diversification. Yeah. One of the things that John DeMartini talks about in his book, and I interviewed him for my podcast, actually, that's going to be released pretty soon. But one of the things that he mentions in his book is, saving your money and building some sort of cushion and being able to have money to invest in yourself. That was something that was really important. As soon as I got that, then it became a little bit more real. But yeah, we just, we are taking a little bit of a risk too. But we just decided to just jump in with both feet and give this a shot. Now, fortunately, I'm not going to be all alone in such a big space. I've got probably New Zealand's best bird sculptor. His name's Mike Norris. He's originally from the UK. Very talented guy, does amazing bronze birds. International species, but he really loves his New Zealand species. He's going to be sharing the studio space with me. He's got a area in the studio in the back where he's going to be making his sculptures. I've got somebody else who's going to be actually working in the gallery portion. So I'm not going to be out there.
That's fantastic.
Greeting people as they come in. We've hired somebody for that. And so that's really important as well, is just making sure that I just stay on track and keep the work flowing.
Well, I hope I get to visit it someday. That would be something I'd like to do. I've never been to New Zealand. I've not been to Australia. It's on my list of things I would love to do. So
New Zealand's one of those places. I mean, I only ever hear one complaint about New Zealand, and that's that people never took enough time when they were booking their trip to really see the place. They take a couple of weeks and they try to do the whole country. You need some time, but the South Island, I can highly recommend that. But I will just mention one thing that I forgot with this space. Now, I'm going to be reintroducing classes, workshops, and tours.
Oh, there you go.
If people do want to see a little bit more of New Zealand and see a little bit more of the countryside and paint it alongside me, then we're going to have tours very soon, and even to do workshops within this space. It's a big space, so there's a lot of room for a few people in there. So yeah, I can't wait, man. I just every day I'm just itching to just get in there. But last night I was up till very late painting the beams. Were we installed in that space. So not only am I painting at the easel and doing my bit with my videos and working with my wife on that, but I'm also in there doing physical work. I've got some workmen down there today, fortunately, but I'm still getting my hands dirty myself. I'm still find myself in this headspace where I find myself locked into this kind of motivationally business sidey kind of dynamic with what I do, just because of the nature of the questions that I'm starting to get now. And so I find if I get locked too much in that headspace, I forget to talk about the art.
Man, I tell you what, Andrew, I used to, in my other podcast, we drove in. We would dive into that quite a bit, and it ended up being something that people enjoyed hearing. But they still wanted the nuts and bolts. I had to find a way to balance it there. But I'm like you. I kind of get excited about this stuff because that's what I've done for years. Is I'd have multiple revenue streams. I haven't been paid by the hour in years, and I like that.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that is rich though in a respect, isn't it? I mean
Yeah.
that's to me that's real wealth because the more wealthy people that I'm around, the more I realize just how miserable they are, like everybody else.
They are. Yeah.
And the thing that the really happy wealthy ones have, they've worked out that dynamic that it's not about the money, it's about the freedom, and it's about doing what you love. And if you've got that, then there's no paycheck that makes it any better.
I'm really excited that you're developing your own gallery. You're going to have these workshops. You really epitomize what I've believed for a long time is to having multiple revenue streams and that sort of thing to help you have the flexibility to pursue the things that you enjoy doing. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
We were talking about something earlier, and I would like to go back to it if I may. And
Certainly.
We were talking about, you asked me about the joy of the sale, and I feel like I could make that point a little bit better because, as I mentioned, it's not necessarily about selling. The joy is not in that. It's derived from the making. But one of the things that I found, and I fell into this trap, and I'll see if I can unpack this in such a way that it will make sense and hopefully really hit home. I'm not a fan of painting the same thing over and over and over again, but I did get into that trap. So what I realized was, when I first approached this, I had a major breakout exhibition, probably my most significant exhibition. I was part of a group show. It was 2009, and I was showing at a gallery in Margaret River. And it was, I had maybe about 10 works there. And these were some of the works that I was really proud of. There was one painting, though, that just seemed to happen and flow effortlessly. And I remember that feeling in the studio of just being completely absorbed in my subject matter and wanting to just speak the truth when it came to this particular subject. And it was a violent seascape, these waves crashing against these big granite boulders, and the light was low, and it was something that was just this raw power of nature that I was trying to get out. And I was really, really interested in Victorian 19th century painters, and they're actually a lot looser than many people realize. And I was really interested in how loose Waterhouse was painting. I thought, wonder what Waterhouse would have done if he approached this subject. So I was thinking about that as I was trying to paint this picture. And it just happened. And when I put it up in the exhibition, it sold immediately. It was one of the first ones to go. And it was not a cheap painting either. But then I thought, magic formula, or so I thought. And so what had happened is I had attached to that rough seascape cell. So I went back to the studio and I started painting some more of those rough seascapes, trying to recapture that high that had just happened accidentally in the studio as a result of the process. But now I had attached to it some sort of monetary value, and I had gotten a little bit of validation from that, which I was so desperately seeking at the time. I was really shallow, really insecure, and I needed a little bit of that validation. Somebody please tell me I'm okay. And so when I got that, I was like, whoa, okay, that worked. Let's do it again. Now suddenly, instead of focusing and thinking about everything that went into that painting when there wasn't a sale, it wasn't about that for me when I first did it. Now suddenly it was like, I'm going to do this, and I've got 5 more canvases that are blank leaning up against the wall of similar sizes. I'm going to do another 5. So I'm going to have
the same scene, the same type of scene.
The same type of scene, not the same scene, not repainting the exact same thing, but I thought, well, there's a theme here, so I'll just work to this theme. By the time I got to the 4th one, I was already burned out, and so I wasn't actually putting in to this one thing that I was, I had put into that first one. And I realized that I had gotten myself into a nice little trap. And from memory, only a couple of those others sold. Eventually, they were like pulling teeth to try and get those, to market and have those sell. It wasn't my best work, and I do regret that. I'm one of these people that believe in regrets. You always hear, oh, I don't do regrets. I regret.
Oh,
I
yeah,
regret.
that's how you learn.
Absolutely. And regret is a really important tool for me. And I look back on that and I go, I could have really done something more with that. But I saw this happen in other people's careers around me. There was a guy, again, I'm not going to mention names, but people recognize the dynamic. They'll paint something that will look really interesting. It'll be cool. It'll be unique. It'll be, fresh, and it'll be well executed. And you could just tell that artist was invested in the process. And there was, it's this dance, it's this play, and you feel like you're there with them when you're looking at the finished article in situ in the gallery, like, wow. And then you go to maybe the next exhibition, you see it again and again and again and again. And while sometimes people will appreciate, let's throw out an analogy. Like, the I can't remember the name. I'm sorry about this, but the painter who painted the girls with the big eyes.
Oh, yeah. I can't remember her name either.
Okay. Maybe she really loved big eyes, but there was a lot of financial pressure behind her to keep producing those paintings.
Yes.
Keep doing these paintings. And I can imagine there would have been an afternoon or two where she was like, you know what? I just can't face it right now. I don't want to do that. So now for me, I don't know what I'm really going to do next in a year's time, or what subject I'm going to be taking with. There has to be some variety in it, because to me,
Margaret Keane.
Thank you, Margaret Keane. Yeah, to me, it's about the process, and it's about speaking the truth and really digging deep within yourself as an artist to pull out that little kernel of inspiration and go, this is what I stand for. This is what I'm really trying to say. That is what people respond to. And interestingly enough, when you're pleasing yourself, really being authentic. And to me, I've said several times, in my own material, that it's not about originality. Originality is secondary. Absolutely. Authenticity is the key. And people can say they're being authentic, but really deep down, when you're truly being authentic and you're really speaking from the heart of what's important to you, if you love the way the light's shining on a rickety old barn, then go and paint that barn. Who cares that hundreds of people have already done it? Do what you love. And
it's going to be done in your handwriting anyway, right?
Yeah, I really believe that people will respond to that. And I feel like I've proven it for myself that people now, and I'll deal with clients where clients will come in and they say, well, I really like your work. I'd like to commission a painting. Can you tell me how the process works? And I'll say, right, no worries. Well, you can see there's a wide range of things from my website that I produce. I will not go back and paint you something that has already been painted. But what I will do is, if you let me know about a subject, I will produce something along those subject lines. And I will try to encourage them to jump into the design process with me and create that work with me. In terms of, I will provide them options for them to choose from, so they feel like they've got some sort of say and some sort of part in this process. But I explained to them very early on, if you want to have some sort of investment with this painting, or some sort of return on your investment eventually, you want to buy something that's unique and something that it fits in with the overall body of work that I've produced over my career, where there's a series of paintings that kind of exist in their own right, but each one of them is a little bit different in terms of their subject matter. You want to buy something that's an authentic expression from me. You don't want just another, hatchet job that I can just put together in the studio. You want an authentic expression. And once I say that, people are like, yeah, actually, I want a piece of you. Let's do that. And, that's worked really well for me, explaining it that way. And I mean that. I mean, it's not just a sales job. It's not just trying to manipulate my clients into doing what I really want them to do. It's no, look, this is a transaction we're entering into. And in order for me to do my part 100%, I need to be all in. And I think my clients appreciate that now.
Yeah, I had someone ask me the other day, can you paint magnolias? Would you do a commission? Well, no, their first question was, would you do a commission piece? And I said, well, it depends. And I'm always game to something new. I said, well, I want a magnolia flower. I'm looking through it would be awesome if that was something I had done or even had the desire to do.
Fair. Yeah.
I said, well,
I say awesome because I'm about to paint magnolias. So.
Well, they're great. They're beautiful trees. That's here where I live. That is the tree. It's a great tree. And I would be happy to, but it wasn't my, doing florals wasn't my thing. So, I had to tell them, no, maybe, there's someone else that can do that better than what I can do. I hope I didn't do the wrong thing, but I just felt like if I had done it, I don't think I would have done a good job for them. I don't think they would have been happy because my heart wouldn't have been into that particular subject at that time.
That's absolutely the right thing to do then in that case. I mean, if somebody said, I want an 8-foot tall painting of Bart Simpson, I'll tell them where they can go. I'm not about to do that. I don't paint Simpsons or anything that is not.
Well, I don't either.
That's not in the vein of what I've been able to produce and what really drives me. Early on, though, when I first started out, I didn't have the opportunity to be quite so choosy. That was, and my father really encouraged me early on. He's like, Andrew, take the money, just get it because it beats working. My last job, the very last job that I had, I was working in a milk fridge. It was a giant aircraft hangar sized refrigerator. And you can imagine from all the spilled milk.
It had to be delightfully smelly, right?
It smelled like vintage cheddar, like 24/7. And I'd come back from that thing freezing and stinking. And that was my last job. And he's like, Andrew, paint Bart Simpson. It beats working in that fridge. I'm like, yeah, actually, you got a point there. But not that I ever painted Bart Simpson, but I painted a dragon. And I didn't really want to paint the dragon, but it ended up looking kind of cool. But I painted a dragon early on. I did a few different things.
That's going to be the episode title. Andrew Tischler, Dragon Slayer.
Yeah.
No.
I've gotten some requests. I've gotten some requests for people. Paint a dragon. I'm like, no, it's not going to happen.
Oh my goodness. Well, but isn't being human and being in business? It's really. I don't want to use the word, sometimes people view compromise in a negative way, but really, we have to please those who buy. And if we're going to support ourselves, we have to sell something they like. We have to produce the quality that will attract them to what we do. So there's a little give, there's a give and take there.
No, absolutely. There is give and take, and that is, you're absolutely right. Again, this is the position I find myself in now is something that I've built over years, and it's not something I couldn't have just come out of the gates and done this. I absolutely not. It had to be built up slowly and gradually, piece by piece, by following the advice and wisdom of people far smarter than me. But you're absolutely right. Sometimes, especially in the beginning, there is a little bit of compromise. But also, I think, on the other hand, it can be interesting trying a whole bunch of different things, because I think early on in your career, you don't really know who you are yet and what you respond to. So getting an enormous amount of variety out in there is important. But I want to go back. So, I mean, I had found myself, because I was the landscape guy for a lot of years, and it wasn't until a good 5 or 6 years in, or maybe more, that I decided I'd introduce another subject, and I decided I'd paint a wedge-tailed eagle. And this was not the one that people can see on YouTube, but one that I did many years ago. And that painting, I remember a client came in, because I heard back from Colin, my agent, and he said, Andrew, we got some comments on this painting. A lot of people like it, but I heard something today that was not so great. I was like, what's that? And they said, well, they were looking around. They're like, oh, love all these paintings. But how much for the eagle? And he told them the price, and they're like, for that? It's a bird. And suddenly I realized that my paintings of birds weren't taken as seriously as my paintings of landscapes. I waited too long.
So in their mind, the bird is what devalued the painting? The subject matter?
It was not a typical work for me. It was not something that fit within the vein, so they thought that might actually hurt their investment. And so also the fact they did not appreciate the subject matter either. You know, it wasn't a big grand landscape. It was a, you know, this eagle on a branch, you know, and I was really proud of the painting, but to them it didn't hit the right points for it to command that price. I'd priced it exactly the same because it was the same size as some of those landscapes. So I priced it right up there at the same price. And we did end up selling it.
To that person?
No, to a different person.
Oh, okay.
But what... Yeah, to somebody who could not have been better match for that painting. I'm really glad it went to the right home. But it was interesting seeing that dynamic. But I realized then that I needed to build a little bit of variety in, because I was so desperately wanting to paint portraits and still lifes and try some on plein air painting and just do all of these things that I'd seen my artist hero painters do. I was like, well, these guys, they're not sticking to just one thing. You know, and especially when they started out, there was a huge variety before they decided they would specialize. And when they specialized, who knows what reasons? I mean, there are probably as many reasons out there for them going specialized as there are artists out there. You know, they're unique situations. But I recognize that, you know, one of my favorite painters was John Seeger Sargent. And whenever he painted a landscape. I mean, it was one of the best landscape paintings that had ever been painted. When he did a portrait, some of the best portraiture that's ever been painted, in my opinion. I just think he was a wonderful artist. And then he not only did oils, but he did watercolor, and he did that equally as well. You know, and I'm just thinking, how can one guy, you know, just be a master of so much? And suddenly one of my goals early on was to just try and master as much as I could for myself. You know, when I say master, I'm not interested in other people calling me a master or being considered a master. I know where I'm at. And I know how far I have to go. That's the important thing for me. So I just wanted to get as good as I could at so many different things.
Well, that's evident when I look at your paintings. The portraits are just, they draw you in. I just, there's a deep reverence of the person in those paintings.
Yeah, it's interesting. Portrait commissions are something that I really struggle with. The portraits that I've put up on my website, for the most part, are portraits that I was not commissioned to do. So again, that takes the money side of things right out of it. One of my favorite portraits was the first video I ever put up on YouTube, was my painting of Russell Petherbridge. And I struggled my way through that painting. But I think the end result, you know, was something that I was really proud of, and something that I think he really enjoyed seeing that whole process as well. And it's probably my most viewed video on YouTube. And so people might get a kick out of that. But to me, that was a fascinating process. I still have the painting here in my house. I'll never part with it. But it was amazing how it came together. And I found I think it would have ruined it if somebody had paid me to do that. You know, I think that probably would have ruined the process, because I get uptight when somebody pays, especially for a portrait. And I do get a lot of portrait commissions, and I do the best I can with them. But if I'm honest, and hopefully it's mainly painters listening to this and not collectors, but when somebody commissions a portrait, you know, suddenly you've got their needs, wants, wishes, hopes, and dreams rattling around in your brain while you're trying to be your most creative, and you're trying to turn that artistic genius on, and you've got so many things that are distracting away from that it becomes almost an impossible task.
You sound like a guy that wouldn't mind bearing his soul a little bit. Was there ever a disaster that you had to work your way out of when it came to a commission?
How long do we have?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've had so many things happen. I've had, fortunately, I've always got there. There's an interesting situation that happened with me that maybe would be beneficial to unpack a little bit. But I've always gotten there. I've always made it to the finish line. I've always made it to the deadline. And I've always been able to deliver a product, because at the end of the day, we are, I mean, not to sound too mercantile about it, but we are making products for the market. So I've always gotten there, which I'm really glad I was able to pull some of these things out of the fire. But yeah, one disaster that comes to mind is I dropped a stool or it fell over against a painting that was leaning against the floor, and the leg of the stool went through the canvas on a painting that had just finished, a massive painting of the Kimberley. And the client was none the wiser, but somewhere out there is a big grand landscape of the Kimberley with a patch in the back of the painting.
Oh, no.
So I have an art restorer on call, a good friend of mine, who I'll call up and I say, help, something's happened. Sometimes, though, when a problem arises, I said in a recent recording that I made that I haven't released yet, that I actually look forward to problems with clients and customers, because I look forward to an opportunity.
Okay, I was going to ask, why is that? I mean,
I look forward to having an issue or a situation arise where I can have an opportunity to make that problem right. Because I feel that people, for the most part, will remember that. They'll remember the fact that an issue came up and that I was so responsive and quick to fix it and go out of my way and bend over backwards to make my customers and my clients happy, to do what's right by them, that hopefully they see that that's a quality that shines through overwhelmingly. So another situation that happened, which I don't know if it can be called a disaster, but it talks about this kind of customer service aspect of it. I had this exhibition where a lovely lady had come through, and she had seen this painting, and she's like, I love that painting, but it's sold. I'm like, well, I might be able to produce something similar. I've got lots of reference to the same place, but I won't be able to paint that for you again. She's like, well, that's perfect, because I don't want exactly like that. I want the same scene, but that's a vertical. Can you do mine horizontal landscape? And I said, okay, I could do that. I'm going to change it up a little bit, but so it's unique. But you do realize that by going horizontal, this vertical aspect of looking down into the scene is going to be lost. You're going to be looking out across it, not down into it. And she understood, so I thought. And so I produced the painting. She ended up buying the painting, but she wasn't excited about receiving it. And I could just tell something was off. And weeks later, she came into my agent and she said, I'm not happy with this painting, and I'm wondering if we can trade it. And my agent at the time said, I don't know. I'll call Andrew and we'll see what we can do. And so he called me, and immediately I said, yes, absolutely. Whatever she needs. And, my agent agreed as well. I mean, this was an important client. And this was somebody that it wasn't that we were trying to kiss up to this person, but it was more, she had bought a lot previously, and she was somebody that we really wanted to take care of, and we knew, and we really liked and respected. And so I ended up working out what she had wanted. And so I went above and beyond. I'm a big believer in always going the extra mile with everything you do in life, whether it's in your relationships, your business, or your art, always go the extra mile. And so I said, what would you like instead? She said, well, I like this new series that you've done of the Great Ocean Road in Victoria. Do you think you might be able to do two smaller paintings, and I'll put them in the same place in my house, instead of that one big one? I said, well, okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll do you 5, and you can pick out your favorite 2 of those 5. So that way I know you're really going to be happy with your choice. And she said, perfect. So I produced 5 paintings. She picked her favorite 2. She loves them. And the other, I kept one. I've got one hanging in my office here. It sits above my wife's desk. The other 2 sold from memory. So it was one of those situations that that painting, the commission, actually, interestingly enough, it never sold, and I ended up giving it to my agent, and now he's got it on his living room wall, and they love it. They're very happy with it, and I'm glad. But that was one of the kind of disasters that I guess, if we can call it that. But you mean more technical, probably.
No, that's exactly what I meant. I was, I'm glad you shared that. I appreciate it very much. There's a question I got, though, that came from all of that. You mentioned a number of times that you had an agent. So is that how you connect with your clients now, or was that through the gallery?
Oh, okay. So when I say agent, a gentleman by the name of Colin Dixon, and it was Colin and his wife, Gabriel. She goes by Gay. It was Colin and Gay that had this gallery. So I always, when I say agent, I'm referring to Colin, and he was a gentleman that we became great friends. I mean, they sat across from my wife and I at our wedding. We're very close, and so yeah, he really understood, and we were both on the same wavelength. It was one of those relationships that just kind of clicked, and it unfortunately doesn't happen for everybody. In my conversation with Cesar Santos, when it came to galleries and agents, he kind of flipped my thinking a little bit, because when it comes to paying commission, for instance, he told me that he offered to pay his galleries more because he knew he was going to get more marketing, publicity, and attention when it came to this massive stable of artists that, you're vying for attention and trying to make those sales. How do you compete with the other artists that are showing with that gallery? He said, offer him more money. So I'm like, well, that's interesting. That's an interesting concept. So, but I never really could get around that. So now I am my agent. I might entertain the idea of hiring a publicist or somebody to help me with the marketing aspect. But at the moment, I've got so much work to do and so many videos to put up on YouTube, and it's just I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to see the end of 2 years. So before I'm at the bottom of this.
My wife has a Calvin and Hobbes cartoon. I always like Calvin and Hobbes, and
yeah, I love those guys.
Yeah, so he's just scowling away. He says, "God put me on this earth to do so many things, and I'm so far behind, I'll never die." so
I love that. If only it were true.
So I want to get back to the nuts and bolts of the painting itself. So the first thing I'd like to know is, where do you get the idea for your paintings?
Great. Amazing question. And again, people are going to have a wide variety and background out there. So my particular take on this, and it's just what I choose to believe, it makes it easier for me to kind of tackle these broad concepts. But I believe inspiration, or the idea, is a gift from God in a way. I don't have a better way of putting it than that. But some sort of divine creative force injects this thing into you, and there's a spark of inspiration. It's the gift of thought. It's something that just happens spontaneously, almost out of nowhere. It's a flash in the dark, so to speak. And I could be sitting there in a relaxed state. Meditation is something that I've just recently been getting back into after many years of not doing it. That is enormously beneficial. There are things that you can do that are meditative, which will facilitate this creation of ideas, or create a blank slate in order for that idea to find its place. So whenever that idea comes in, then I have to act on it. And I find that it's really interesting. The idea, for the most part, it's the idea that comes first before I actually go and see a landscape or a person. The inspiration happens first. It's almost like this preempting of something that's going to happen, almost like a premonition in a way. But I mean, I know how far out and cuckoo this sounds, so bear with me. But I'm not saying that it is that, but it's almost like that. It feels that way very much. So there's a painting. I'll give you an example, a real example of what I'm about to do and a project I'm about to embark on, and how the design process fits into this one particular idea. So in Lawrence, in New Zealand, where I live, there's a lot of history here, and there's a place that was a little township that is not but like a mile or two from the main town, where there was another town called Weatherston. And Weatherston's where there was a brewery back in the day. And this was a huge operation back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, and it became quite an operation. And now it's an absolute ruin. There's rubble and bricks everywhere. Mm. There's what's left of an old wall, and there's an old house that's just up the bank behind it. And there are trees growing out of these old stone walls, and it's hauntingly beautiful. And there's something a little bit sad about it as well. I have been wanting to paint things, and I'd been looking at previously, even before moving here, I'd become really interested in this idea called, Gothic folly, where people would build things in their gardens and landscape features that were, looking like a ruin, but were completely manufactured and completely made up. So you would have like maybe the corner of a wall in your garden somewhere that was like stacked stone. It's a pretty cool little dive to go into if you want to just do a quick Google search on Gothic folly. Yeah. But I was thinking maybe I could create something and then paint that. And so my brain was already chewing on this thing where I had seen it in other people's paintings from the past. I was really, loved the Dutch painters, from 17th century, 18th century. And I wanted to paint landscapes that were dark, moody, emotive, and had some sort of aspect of decay in there that was like this human aspect, but where nature was almost taking it back. So this idea was starting to come in and really develop. So as you can hear, I'm pulling inspiration from many different places at once, but that initial spark, it was just this bam of this flash going, I've got to do this. I've got to paint this. Then what happened is when we moved here and then I saw Weatherston's brewery for the first time, suddenly I had my subject. I was like, there's no way I'd be able to make anything like this. It's pretty large. It was a big building and there's only one corner of it left. The roof's gone. There's what's left of an old pad for the floor, but this big, beautiful, gnarly brick wall with trees growing out of it. I'm like, how can I beat that? And I was thinking, what would make this painting is a horse. I don't know why. I just want to put a horse in it. And again, that flash of inspiration, I just have to paint a horse in this landscape. Again, going back to those Dutch paintings that I was really enjoying at the time. And I called up a friend of mine from the town, and I said, look, I got this painting. I hope local people as well as international people are going to appreciate it, but I just have to do it. Do you think it will make sense? And she said, well, what color's the horse? And I said, I don't know why, but it's got to be a black horse. I just want to paint a black horse. And she said, Andrew, did you know that was called the Black Horse Brewery?
No way.
I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? And she said, yeah, they used to have black Clydesdales that would haul the beer barrels through town. And they would carry the beer barrels to the pubs that were all around the place. Oh, wow. I'm like, you're joking. And she says, I know a guy with black Clydesdales. I'm like, what?
Would you be interested?
I said, we got to do a photo shoot. And so now what's happening is I'm going to be organizing a photo shoot to go and paint the black Clydesdale and photograph this beautiful horse. And it's a situation that it couldn't be more perfect the way it all came together. So getting to the real material aspect of it, of how that process would work. I do use photographs a lot in my process, but I have never in my career, and I must stress this, it's very important, I have never found a single photograph that I ever wanted to copy to make a painting from. It doesn't work like that. Rather, I use photographs in the process to arrive at the final image, which hopefully it doesn't always happen, but the goal is to push that painted image further than any photograph could ever achieve. So I'm going to gather a multitude of photographs of this animal from many different angles. Probably none of them are going to be suitable to copy for this painting. And when I put up the tutorial on YouTube, people will be able to see that this is an accumulation, an amalgamation combination of many different things. I'm going to go to the site and I'm going to paint on plein air this ruin. And fortunately, it's just down the road. I could walk there. I could just drive and take me a minute to get there. So I'll set up my easel in front of this ruin, paint it. And so I'll take these photographs and these paintings from the site. Maybe I'll do a sketch of the horse from life, do a few little gestural drawings and character studies. And so you can imagine, if you can picture my desk, I've got maybe the iPad with some photographic reference. I got some screens there as well. So I've got some different photographs up, and then I got my own plein air study on a little table easel next to me, and then a few sketches. And then I start to design the painting. And that design process is so important to me. And originally I twigged on the idea as I was looking at more and more paintings by the old masters. So the design process is really is something that I've developed as I was looking at the works of old masters and some of my hero artists. I realized, I twigged on this idea. Everything that I'm seeing by these people is consistently awesome. How can that be? And now, granted, people aren't going to exhibit the duds or the failures, but I could see a certain amount of consistency there. And I thought
there was something that ensured their success is what you're saying.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. There was something there behind that process that ensured that when they showed up and they painted something, it was awesome. What was that? And it was like, oh, duh, it's a methodology. Consistency comes from some sort of methodology, from having some sort of systematized or organized approach to your work that gives you a level of predictability. Out of that, spontaneity is born. So for people thinking, well, hang on, if I have a methodology, then I'm not going to be in touch with my inner child when I come to the easel, and this beautiful painting of magnolias is not going to be born. Like, no, it doesn't work. Like, plan your painting out, plan out in the design process. And then that way you can really get every ounce of creative juice out of this idea. So for me, I'll start sketching. I'll do a series of thumbnails. So I'll take a piece of paper out of my sketchbook, maybe about the size of an A4, and I will divide that up into 8 or 6, and I will do a little thumbnail, and I'll keep it really tonal and really simple. So that thumbnail is no bigger than a couple of postage stamps. It's tiny, but that will have so much information in it. I can see where my darkest dark is going to go, where my lightest light's going to go, and I don't spend any more than about 5, maybe 10 minutes at the most on one of those thumbnails. Sometimes I can get them out in about a minute or 2 minutes. Then once I go to the next little thumbnail, I'm still working with the same idea, but I ask myself 3 questions. And these 3 questions have made my career. The first one is, what's working? I identify in that little thumbnail or whatever idea, or even a life situation or a business situation. It works for all aspects, but this can help you create awesome art. What's working? Identify those things that are working, that you do like, and keep those when you move over to your next little design. Now, then the next question I ask is, what's not working? And this is your opportunity to be like super hyper aware and critical and say, well, look, this is too dark. It weighs down my right-hand corner too much. That tree is too big. It needs to be moved and needs to be diminished within space so that my horse can really take center stage. So that's, those are the kinds of things that I start developing.
Are you making notations on the drawing with those observations? Okay.
Absolutely. That, or I might have a separate piece of paper. Like I've got notebooks where I'll write copious amounts, and I'll just fill up notebooks with just notes. If anybody found my notebooks, I'd be like, what is this rubbish? But to me, it means something. A lot of it has to do with the design process that we're talking about. The last question, so we've got what's working and what's not working. And the last question is a really powerful question, the most powerful question any artist can ask themselves, which is, what if? Now, what if ... you could fill in that ... with anything. And this is your opportunity to unleash your creative genius here, where you now suddenly realize that you're in control of the design and you're not reliant on that photograph. It's like, well, I only have a photograph for one black Clydesdale. Well, what if there were 2? Oh, Well, that's a more interesting idea. And now what if there was a relationship between those two horses and the viewer would be able to get something from that relationship? And you had an opportunity. Maybe they weren't both black, but one was black and one was white, and you could play against the contrast. Oh, now you're getting somewhere creatively. What if there was a person? Okay, what if we shifted the light? What if we pretended that this was a stage and we spotlit this scenario here, and then that ruin was just fading away into the background like a ghostly masonry kind of shadow,
like a Thomas Cole painting.
Perfect. Yes, Thomas Cole. Absolutely. Like, what if we could just push this? So what if you're now unlimited, absolutely limitless, and you can push that to the nth degree. There is a danger there, though. The first thing I should make a note of this, and I do write down in the sketchbook or on my note paper what that initial idea is. So you can get a little bit carried away. I'll give you an example. What if my painting of Weatherston's Brewery with a black Clydesdale, what if there was a pterodactyl in the background? Like, what if? Yeah, okay. Well, like that doesn't make any sense. Like, so you can carry what if too far, and you can be a little bit too crazy with it. So, yeah, I'm back to dragons again. But you can see that as long as you're honing in on getting the most out of your idea and that narrative and story. So I try to write down, what is the story behind my painting? What is the narrative? And that's just a collection of words or one sentence. I'm not writing an essay on it. It's just, this is a painting about this. And then I'll develop that idea. So finally, after I arrive at my sixth or eighth thumbnail, you can imagine that I've got an idea that is pretty well developed, and I'm happy to blow it up to a bigger scale. Then I'll do something that is maybe a full page in the sketchbook or a half page in the sketchbook. And then that way I'll be able to see details. I'll be able to see, I know the composition is going to work because of my tonal studies, but now I can see real detail in there. And that will inform a color study. Then I'll do a color study or a little small painting. And then finally, I'm ready to do the big painting. Now, there's an old saying out there that everybody has 20/20 vision in hindsight. Well, what if every painting you ever did was in hindsight? You'd be able to fix every mistake you were going to make. And that's just coming from my own personal point of view. It doesn't mean that I couldn't ever do it any better. Of course I could. You can always improve. But it's like, how do you do the very best you can right now from where you're standing?
So you practiced.
That process helps me get there. Yeah, you practiced it. You did it. The reason I know it's going to work from where I am right now is because I've been there. And so then finally, I mean, that painting, there's still the opportunity, the space for spontaneous surprises to just emerge through the process of painting, because there's so much more information that comes out of a painting than, will ever come out of a tiny little color study on an 8x10 panel or out of your sketchbook. When you're and this painting of the horse is going to be quite big. I already have the canvas selected for it. But it's something that I now rely on, and it bites me in the butt every time I think I'm so smart that I don't have to design this painting. I'm just going to go for it. It always gets me. So once I had that worked out, I realized, okay, you know what? You better stick with it. I slip up now and again, but I'm pretty quick to go back and go, oh yeah. That's why I do this.
Well, yeah, you're minimizing the mistakes, and I like that. I'm just now experimenting with that. As a beginner, I was so eager to get right onto the canvas with a hardboard and just make little marks on there and sketch it out. But by the time you put $50 worth of paint on it, it's too late. If you've made a mistake, you got to scrape it all off and do it again, and you've wasted a lot of money, and you're frustrated, and you're in a bad mood because you wasted all that stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, how much better it would have been to sketch it out. So that's something I've just recently. I bought a book by it. The thing was expensive, by Ted Kautsky. It was really nice.
Oh,
man, that
Ted
is a
Kautsky.
That is a great
that
book.
Guy. Yeah, look, you can find reprints. I've got a couple of original prints here in the studio that my father had. Ted Kautsky is one of the best draftsmen, that ever lived, in my opinion. And I think he either knew Edgar Payne. I don't know this for a fact, but or they either one.
They would have been contemporaries. Yeah.
One would have been influenced by the other, because they both had very similar methods when it came to composing paintings, and even a similar kind of drafting style. But Kautsky, man, I'm so glad you mentioned that name. Kautsky's amazing. You can still find reprints on Amazon.
Yeah, some of them are very expensive. But don't buy the expensive one. If you're patient, you can wait, and you'll find one on somebody's offering at a reasonable price. That's how I came across this one. But I love the book. I got the Edgar Payne book. We had an exhibit here in Atlanta. Well, not in Atlanta, but Cartersville, which is near Atlanta, at the Booth Western Art Museum. And it's a fantastic museum, but they had several Edgar Payne's, the originals. I've never seen an original. And that was so awesome to see that.
Yeah, man. Like, to look at that. I've never seen an original. I would love to. He taught me so much about color, the way he would fragment his painted surfaces and throw complementary opposites together in a totally counterintuitive way. You know, you would look at that and go, why would you put orange in your sky? What were you thinking? I know,
you're looking at the skies and you're saying, what?
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing. You know, blue never looked so blue as in an Edgar Payne painting. Like he could make gray talk. I loved it. Yeah, I love his work. But I'd love to see an original.
Well, so now you're ready to. You've worked out your design, your ideas. You developed that. You're ready to approach the surface that you're going to paint on. What's the ritual? What's the process to begin laying those strokes down on that surface?
I have a routine that I stick to. I'm just now, speaking of Edgar Payne, you know, I'm just now playing with more, you know, some different approaches to painting, because there are so many different ways to do this. But the one that I is my go-to, that I when I'm painting a work for a client, I'll break it into three major parts. I'll always start with a block-in, where I'm blocking in my composition and laying down a ground of color, you know, the underpainting, so to speak. And I keep that layer very thin, and I keep my colors very, very simple and very pared back. Nothing's very saturated. So for instance, if it's painting of the Kimberley and there's some red cliffs, it's not the reddest red I can muster. It's a drab, desaturated, pared back version of the highest notes that I'm going to make. And it's also, I won't have my darkest darks. So my lightest lights, my darkest darks won't be in that background painting. It's just blocks of grayed out, desaturated color, where I now can start to get a sense of where the major shapes and zones are going to go. There are ways that I can get that block in down by using, you know, my design and using a grid, or, you know, measuring plot points and carefully, you know, measuring it onto the canvas. But now more and more, I'm just winging it with a paintbrush, and I'm getting better now, the more years go on, at judging where one shape, how that fits in with another shape, and getting those relationships correct. I think that if you're not able to do that yet, then a grid system can really help you, especially if you take your sketchbook, make a copy of your drawing and grid up the copy of your drawing. Don't destroy your sketch by doing a grid on top of it. But yeah, you take that detailed drawing, and that's what I would transfer up, is that detailed version out of the sketchbook. So from the block end, then over the top of that comes a layer called modeling, where I'll manipulate those areas of color with a little bit more precision. I'll start to introduce some higher notes, some more high key colors, some higher chroma, if you will, some darker darks, and start to hone in on the drawing aspect of it as well, and start to really define my shapes. If you can imagine, this is almost like the process of looking at a landscape out of through a camera and pulling that focus ring. So it starts off very unfocused, very blurry, and then as you're pulling that focus ring, it starts to get more and more resolved, and you can see the details more and more as you kind of go through the stages of this process. And finally, after the modeling, that's the detail, and the detail is where most of the time is spent with my particular process. This is where I will, painstakingly kind of etch out bark on a tree and maybe some leaves or grass, or really work on the water and how it moves over rocks. That's something that takes a lot of time, but this is my opportunity now to really push and pull that image to make sure it says what I want it to say. There is a little stage that I'll add to it. Maybe let's call it 3+, which is glazing. Okay. And this is something that I'm playing with more and more. So after your detail phase, there might be a period of time where the painting's starting to dry. And I love putting paintings up around me that I'm still working on. And sometimes they'll be in the process of being worked on for maybe a year, maybe more, where I'll say, hey, look, that the rendering on that face is a little bit off and there's something up with the expression. I might just apply a glaze and change the way the light hits that portion of the face, and maybe that'll round out the form. So lighter glazes might be used with a more dry brush scumbling technique, using maybe some more, lighter colors, maybe some lead white with a few tints put in there. Or a darker glaze will be a little bit more fluid in nature, and we'll go into the shadowed portions to crisp up and really harden some edges, perhaps. And then finally, after the brushes have been put down for maybe 6 months to a year, I might get a chance to do a final varnish. Some people might be thinking, well, yeah, but how do you do a commission? People aren't going to wait 2 years. How then are you going to then turn around and varnish? No one's going to wait that long. That's a little business strategy for me. I've got everybody's name on a Rolodex, and now it's all on a computer, but I'll call up whoever the name might come up, and I'll say, okay, well, it's been 6 months or a year. Time for me to varnish your painting.
Customer contact. I like this.
Gets difficult when I'm international, so I'm only able to do it now and again. But sometimes I'll be able to connect them with either a restorer or a conservator, somebody that will be able to do the varnishing for them, or I'll be able to give them recommendations on how to get that taken care of with the help of a professional. But touching base with the customer, then you kind of get into a personal situation where you're a bit chatty back and forth. You're like, oh yeah, I've been working on this, been working on that. Oh, by the way, I've got this. What do you think about that? Never selling. I'm always right. Just kind of letting people know that, hey, I've got a seascape. You like seascapes?
Yeah, there you go. I like that. Well, one other thing I want to ask about your paints, because you paint with a brand that I had never heard of called Language paints. They're not readily available here in the States.
No,
but
no. I've used Language for many years, and I they make fantastic paint. Love the paint. I'm just now starting to branch out into other brands of paint. I've realized that people have had a really hard time. I don't have a relationship with Language as a company. They don't sponsor me or anything. So I just wanted people through my YouTube channel to know what I was using, and I've fallen in love with this particular brand. I was just like, guys, get your hands on this stuff. So it's a great paint, handmade in Melbourne. But I'm a big fan of the handmade paints, or the kind of the old school paints where there are small batches of paint made with careful controls, and they're. The consistency and the quality, that's something that's really important, because when I open a tube of burnt umber, I want to know that burnt umber is going to stay the same over a period of years. That when I run out of a tube, maybe after a year, and I go and buy a new tube, it's not something different. So that consistency is really important. These guys who make this paint, the quality controls are really quite rigorous. And so that's what probably my first, consideration when it comes to deciding what brand of paint I'd be using. I'm really taken with what Michael Harding's able to do, as well as Gamblin. I've not used Gamblin, but I'm about to experiment with some Gamblin. I hear they make very good quality paint.
It is a good paint. I enjoy it.
I do love Old Holland. That's another paint that I'm really enjoying at the moment. A friend of mine has lent me a few Old Holland colors, and I'm just like, wow, man, very expensive, but beautiful paint. Williamsburg as well, Vasari, Block, Rublev. Rublev's an interesting one. There's an artist and an author that I respect immensely, Virgil Elliott, who he uses Rublev, and he helped develop Rublev. And one of the unique points about that paint is it is a really traditional paint. A lot of paint manufacturers nowadays will put in additives into their paints to change the quality and the characteristics. So you got to think when you're squeezing paint out of a tube, there's a certain amount of, degree of practicality. So, in order for it to be a consistent, homogeneous mixture, you want to have a stabilizer in there, which is often something like an aluminum stearate. And that some artists don't really like or appreciate. And Virgil Elliott's one of these artists that is a real stickler for traditional mediums and methods of applying that. So he encouraged the manufacturer to take all additives, all stabilizers, all dryers, nothing but oil and paint pigment goes in that paint. And some of them you pour out of the tube, and some of them are very thick. But then it's what he's able to do with them on the palette. That's where the painting begins. So he considers, I guess he considers those tubes just to be like a vessel to be able to carry that pigment and oil. But that's a very traditional paint. And I understand it's a really good brand too. I'm looking forward to experimenting with that as well.
Nice.
But at the end of the day, I got my start. I got my career, underway with a cheap, off-the-shelf brand of paint that was available all across Australia. It was called Art Spectrum, and I bought, initially the student quality, and then moved up to the higher quality pigments that they had in their range. And at the end of the day, I don't think it's necessarily about your paint. Paint and pigments and maybe a particular color or a mixture can help, sure. And I certainly, as a professional now, enjoy working with the best materials I can get my hands on. But that's not, you can go out there as a student and spend several $100s on oil paint and still not have the fundamentals in place of drawing and design and, working from observation. Adhering to some core principles and some key practices. I think that's the most important thing when you're starting out. As you build your skills, then you'll appreciate those higher quality materials all the more. But I think really initially you should start with absolutely start with the basics and master those basics. And then move on, from there. And, if all you can afford at this stage is some cheap student quality oil paint, you can still paint one heck of a picture with those.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. And you introduced me to the dagger brush. I'd never seen such a thing. I'm going to have to order one of those or a set of them.
I have been working in conjunction with Rosemary & Co. and a fantastic brush company, and we developed a special type of brush that I just couldn't get anywhere. And I wanted to make a particular kind of mark and travel at a particular speed, because when I'm working at quite a clip, and I just couldn't. I couldn't find a brush that would give me the type of mark I wanted to make, where I could do an edge or a broad stroke or a point all in the one brush. And I had seen sign writers use angles and daggers before, but I'd never really seen one or enjoyed working with them when they were made out of bristle. And so these rosemary daggers, we call it the Tish. Sorry, But the Tish dagger, I got to say, it's not just because my name's on it. My nickname is Tish, but not just because my name's on it. I love that brush, man. I think Rosemary & Co., we went back and forth on that design for months, and I think they nailed it. We're going to pull probably the smallest of those daggers, because the smaller sizes don't hold their bristles together. But as you get up around about an inch in that blade, for your blocking and modeling process, those things are amazing. As you come into your detail, probably around about a 1/2 inch to a 1/4 inch. Probably 1/4 inch is getting a little bit too fine, but around about 1/2 an inch, that's the sweet spot for a lot of my detail process, which you'd think would be quite big for a detail brush, but that brush is just so versatile. I love it. So there's even a set. Rosemary Co. have sets. They've got an introductory set and a deluxe set, and they're available from rosemaryco.com. And again, when people purchase their brushes and their brush sets, it does go some way towards supporting my channel on YouTube as well. So I do appreciate it when people do get the brushes, because it does help me continue to do what I do on YouTube.
Yeah, this show is costing me money. See, I'm going to go order a set of them now.
There you go.
I love it. I love it. Well, Andrew, what's the best place, or where do you want people to go to start learning about what you are doing in your art?
There's several places people can go. At the moment, our brand new website is under construction, but still for the meantime, the old website's up. And you can go to andrewtischler.com. My last name is spelled Tischler.com. And there you'll be able to see some examples of my work. There's some links there to my YouTube videos. The most important function on my website at this stage is that subscribe function. And again, this is why we're building a new website, as to improve just the user-friendly aspect of that. But if you enter your name and email address into my website, I put people on my private email list. And so I email people every time I have a YouTube video come out, where I'll, give them some news from the background of what's been happening, around here, what I've been working on in the studio, as well as maybe a little bit more extra material that in conjunction with that video release. But my subscribers through my email list always get those YouTube videos 24 hours ahead of time, so that they're able to jump in the comment section with me and interact with me through those comments. And they can also reply to the emails that I send directly. And I don't always get a chance to respond to every email personally, but I do read every single one. And it's just been wonderful to connect with people that way. So my website, and make sure people, jump on that mailing list. It's absolutely free to do. I'm also on Instagram at Andrew_Tischler_artist. You can find me on Facebook. Just search my name, Andrew Tischler Artist. And on YouTube, of course, I continue to bring out free videos. As long as there's YouTube, there will be Andrew Tischler there bringing out painting videos. So just search my name in YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the channel.
Yes, and there's never enough podcasts, so be sure to subscribe to Andrew's new podcast, The
Yes.
Creative Endeavor. We cannot forget that, Andrew.
Absolutely. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, look, brand new, just started. I'm just finishing the polishing touches on my episode with Virgil Elliott that we were just talking about. And I hoped to have that out this week, but it looks like it might be early next week at this stage for Virgil Elliott. And then we got several other people coming. I just recorded an episode with Stan Prokopenko, some other well-known artists out of the United States, a hero of mine from my childhood I interviewed, which was a lot of fun. So there's a lot of good episodes to come still. And I even had a student of mine, shout out to Cody out in Colorado. Cody's a young guy who I've been coaching along. One of these people that you would consider a child prodigy. When I saw his work for the first time, I was just blown away. I'm like, you're how old? And at the time, I think he was like 12 or 13. And so I've been coaching him for the last couple of years. Just every so often, we'll jump on Skype and we'll have a Skype session. And Cody interviewed me for one of my episodes of The Creative Endeavor. So
Nice.
that's gonna be fun. So
I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah. So he put together some questions and he interviewed me, and we're going to put that up on my podcast channel. So you can find that wherever podcasts are available: iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Podbean. I think that's it. I think we're getting onto Spotify soon.
Thank you for being on The Artful Painter.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been an absolute honor and a privilege. I really appreciate it.
Wow, just wow. What a privilege it was to talk with Andrew Tischler. Now, I know this episode was over 2 hours long, and you're probably thinking, how could there be even more information? But there is. Andrew is a fountain of knowledge and experience. He shares a lot of information, not only about the how-to of painting, but also the how-to of business, diversifying your income. He is certainly a fountain of information. Visit his website at andrewtischler.com. Check out his YouTube channel and also check out his new podcast, Creative Endeavors. I'll have links to all of those resources as well as to the many artists, books, and other things that we talked about in this episode. You can go to theartfulpainter.com to see the show notes for this show. When you visit The Artful Painter, please take the time to register to receive updates and alerts for future episodes of The Artful Painter. And I want to thank everyone that has done so. I've just been pleasantly surprised at how many people are signing up. I am so grateful to each and every one of you. And I love hearing from you. By the way, when you get an email from me, you can actually reply to those emails and send me additional comments or questions or tips or suggestions. Tell me, an artist you would like to hear from. I like hearing from you. In fact, I just got this email. This is from Susie. She says, "Hi, Carl. I just wanted to drop you a line to say how much I enjoyed your podcasts with Ralph and Matt." So that's Ralph Oberg and Matt Smith. I'm not going to read the whole email because some of it's, just personal details. But she goes on to say, "Thanks for starting this podcast." She says, "I, like you, have started painting later in life. I still don't even have a website." Hey, Susie, that's okay. That's okay. Just paint. She continues, "The thing I love most about this art journey is the friendships and relationships that we have made so far." How true that is, Susie. Thank you for that email. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank every one of you for listening to The Artful Painter. Now go out there and paint something amazing.
Picture on the TV.